Poor girl saves an injured parrot, but when the millionaire owner shows up, a secret comes to light. Lily Morgan wiped the sweat from her brow as she arranged the last bouquet of wildflowers in the rustic wooden stand outside her small shop. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the sleepy town of Pinecrest, a hidden gem nestled in the lush mountains of Vermont. At 24, Lily had become the sole provider for her household, running the only flower shop in town while caring for her mother Eleanor, whose mysterious illness had confined her to their modest home for the past 3 years. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know from which city you're watching us. Let's keep going. These daisies aren't going to last in this heat, Lily muttered to herself, adjusting the flowers one last time before stepping back to admire her work. The Morgan's Blooms sign creaked slightly in the gentle summer breeze, a reminder of better days when her mother had painted it with steady hands. Every morning, Lily would wake before dawn to collect fresh flowers from the surrounding forest before opening the shop. This routine had become her anchor in a life that demanded more strength than she thought she possessed. The town doctor had prescribed expensive medications for Eleanor, forcing Lily to take on additional wedding arrangements and special orders just to make ends meet. "Morning, Lily," called Mrs. Henderson, the town's librarian, as she passed by. "Those arrangements look beautiful today. Are you still coming to help with the flowers for the town hall meeting next week?" Lily nodded with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. I've already started gathering some ideas." After a few more pleasantries, Lily checked her watch. It was time for her daily trek through Whispering Pine Forest to collect some exotic wildflowers that only grew near the old creek. These rare blooms fetched a higher price and were essential for her special arrangements. The forest path felt familiar beneath her worn boots as Lily ventured deeper into the woods, her wicker basket swinging gently at her side. The towering pines created a cathedral-like canopy overhead, dappling the forest floor with shifting patterns of light and shadow. This daily solitude was her only reprieve, a moment of peace in her otherwise chaotic life. As she approached the creek, a flash of brilliant color caught her eye, something that didn't belong among the forest's natural palette. Pushing aside a tangle of ferns, Lily gasped at the sight before her. A magnificent parrot lay sprawled on the ground, its vibrant plumage a startling contrast against the earthy forest floor. The bird's wings were splayed at an awkward angle, and a small trickle of blood stained its otherwise perfect emerald feathers. "Oh, you poor thing," Lily whispered, kneeling beside the injured creature. "What on earth are you doing all the way out here?" The parrot's intelligent eyes fixed on her, seemingly assessing whether she posed a threat. Lily had never seen such an exotic bird outside of pictures in magazines or the occasional nature documentary. In Pinecrest, the most exotic bird was typically a cardinal or blue jay. With gentle movements, she removed her light cardigan and carefully wrapped it around the trembling bird. "I don't know where you came from, but I can't leave you here to die." The parrot made no attempt to flee or fight as she cradled it against her chest. For a moment, Lily hesitated. She had no idea how to care for such an exotic creature. And the veterinarian in town specialized in farm animals, not tropical birds, but something in the parrot's intelligent gaze compelled her to help. "Let's get you home," she decided, abandoning her flower-gathering mission for the day. The walk back was hurried, with Lily taking extra care not to jostle her fragile passenger. By the time she reached the small cottage she shared with her mother, the parrot had grown still, though its rapid breathing indicated it was very much alive. "Mom, I'm home early," Lily called out as she entered through the back door, "and I've brought a visitor." Eleanor Morgan sat in her usual spot by the window, a crocheted blanket draped over her legs despite the summer heat. Once vibrant and full of life, Eleanor's illness had gradually drained the color from her cheeks and the strength from her once capable hands. Yet her eyes remained sharp as ever, widening in surprise at the bundle in her daughter's arms. "Lily, and Morgan, what have you brought into this house?" Despite her frail state, Eleanor's voice carried the familiar tone of maternal authority. "He's hurt, Mom," Lily explained, carefully placing the parrot on the kitchen table. "I found him in the forest near the creek. He must have escaped from somewhere or someone." Eleanor's expression softened as she observed the exotic bird. "In all my years, I've never seen anything like it outside a zoo. What's a tropical parrot doing in Vermont?" "I have no idea, but he needs help." Lily filled a small bowl with water and placed it near the parrot, who eyed it cautiously before taking a tentative sip. "I'll call Dr. Thompson after I get him settled, though I doubt he knows much about birds like this." Over the next few hours, Lily improvised a makeshift nest from an old basket and some soft cloths. She cleaned the wound on the parrot's wing with a gentle touch, relieved to find it was merely a superficial cut rather than a broken bone. Dr. Thompson, when reached by phone, could offer little guidance except to keep the bird warm and try, offering it various foods to see what it would accept. That night, as Lily sat beside the basket, the parrot stirred and looked directly at her. Then, to her astonishment, it spoke. "The safe behind painting." The words were disjointed but unmistakable, spoken in a raspy yet clearly human-like voice. Lily jumped back, nearly knocking over her chair. "Did you just talk?" she whispered, incredulously. The parrot blinked at her but remained silent. Lily shook her head, wondering if exhaustion had finally caught up with her. Over the next few days, as the parrot gradually regained its strength, more fragmented phrases emerged. "Not what it seems," it would sometimes squawk in the middle of the night. "Richardson knows," it declared another time. Most frequently, it repeated the phrase about the safe behind the painting. Lily mentioned these strange utterances to her mother, who seemed more troubled than surprised. "Parrots mimic what they hear, honey," Eleanor said, though her eyes darted away nervously. "Whoever owned this bird must have said these things." "But what do they mean?" Lily wondered aloud. "It feels like he's trying to tell us something important." Eleanor sighed, adjusting her blanket. "Don't read too much into it, Lily. Just focus on helping the poor creature heal so it can be returned to its rightful owner." But Lily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something significant about the parrot's words, especially when it began to fixate on one particular phrase, repeating it with increasing clarity. "The safe is behind the painting in the study." A week after finding the parrot, which she had started calling Echo for his repetitive speech, Lily was arranging flowers in her shop when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up to see a tall, impeccably dressed man entering, his expensive suit and polished shoes, immediately marking him as an outsider in their small town. "Good afternoon," the man said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I'm looking for information about a lost pet, a parrot to be precise." Lily's heart skipped a beat as the man surveyed her small shop with a calculated gaze. His eyes, a steely grey, seemed to take in everything at once. "I'm Alexander Blackwood," he continued, extending a manicured hand, "and I'm willing to pay quite generously for any information that might lead to the recovery of my bird." Alexander Blackwood. The name sent an unexpected chill down Lily's spine. Everyone in Pinecrest knew of Blackwood Estate, the sprawling mansion overlooking the town from the highest hill. The Blackwoods rarely mingled with locals, making appearances only at charity events or town meetings where their interests were directly involved. "What kind of parrot?" Lily asked, trying to keep her voice steady as she reluctantly shook his hand. "An eclectus parrot. Quite rare in these parts, as I'm sure you can imagine. Magnificent green plumage, remarkably intelligent." A practiced smile appeared on his face, not quite reaching his eyes. "He's been in my family for years and has sentimental value." Lily hesitated, her instincts suddenly warning her to be cautious. There was something in the way Alexander Blackwood's gaze darted around her shop, something predatory in his posture, despite his polished veneer. "I might have seen such a bird," she admitted finally. "Is he injured?" Something flickered across Blackwood's face, tension perhaps, or alarm. "Yes, he injured his wing escaping from his cage. Did he say anything to you? He's quite the talker." The question seemed oddly specific, and Lily felt her suspicion grow. What would he say? She countered, buying time as she considered her next move. Blackwood's smile tightened. "Oh, nonsense mostly. He picks up phrases from audiobooks and television. Nothing of consequence." Lily thought of Echo's repeated warnings, the mysterious references to a safe behind a painting. Nothing of consequence didn't align with the intensity with which the parrot delivered those fragments. "I found an injured parrot in the forest last week," she admitted finally. "I've been caring for him at my home." Relief visibly washed over Blackwood's features, quickly replaced by an expression of calculated gratitude. "How wonderful. I must reward you for your kindness. Shall we say $5,000? The amount, more money than Lily would see in 3 months of running her flower shop, made her breath catch. It would cover her mother's medical expenses for half a year, yet something held her back from accepting immediately. "He's still recovering," she said, "and he seems distressed when I mention returning him." Blackwood's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Parrots form attachments quickly, Miss Morgan. Lily Morgan." Miss Morgan. He tested her name as if filing it away for future reference. "I assure you Echo will be well cared for at my estate. Now what has my talkative friend been saying while in your care?" The deliberate mention of the name Echo, the very name Lily had privately given the parrot, sent a warning signal through her mind. She hadn't mentioned the name to Blackwood. Either this was indeed his bird or just random sounds mostly. Lily lied, arranging flowers with forced nonchalance. "He's been too traumatized to speak much." Something dark passed over Blackwood's features before his practiced smile returned. "I see. Well, I'd like to collect him today if possible. $10,000 should compensate you adequately for your trouble." The doubled amount hung in the air between them like a threat disguised as generosity. Lily's mind raced. Why was this wealthy man so desperate to retrieve a parrot? What secrets could the bird possibly know? "I'll need to check with my mother first," she stalled. "We've become quite attached to him." Frustration flashed across Blackwood's face before he masterfully contained it. "Of course. Family considerations are important." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card embossed with gold lettering. "My private number is on the back. Call me this evening with your decision." As he turned to leave, Blackwood paused at the door. "One piece of advice, Miss Morgan. Birds are delicate creatures. They can disappear in an instant. Best not to grow too attached to something that isn't yours to keep." The bell chimed as the door closed behind him, leaving Lily alone with a growing sense of dread and a business card that felt unnaturally heavy in her trembling hand. Lily closed the shop early that day, her mind filled with conflicting thoughts. As she hurried home, the encounter with Alexander Blackwood had left her unsettled, his smooth demeanor barely concealing something cold and calculating beneath. When she reached the cottage, she found Echo perched comfortably on the back of her mother's chair, looking remarkably recovered. Eleanor was gently stroking his feathers, a small smile playing on her lips, the first genuine smile Lily had seen in months. "Mom, you won't believe who came to the shop today," Lily began, setting her bag down with shaking hands. Eleanor's smile faded as she registered her daughter's distress. "What's wrong, honey?" "Alexander Blackwood," Lily said, watching her mother's face carefully. "He came looking for Echo." The color drained from Eleanor's already pale face. Her fingers stilled on the parrot's feathers, and Echo let out a soft, distressed sound in response. He offered $10,000 for his return, Lily continued, pulling out Blackwood's business card. Said Echo has sentimental value to his family. Eleanor's reaction puzzled Lily further. The older woman seemed to shrink into herself, her gaze darting to the window as if expecting to see someone watching. Mom, do you know something about Alexander Blackwood? Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. Everyone in town knows of the Blackwoods, Lily. They've owned half this valley for generations. But your reaction, this seems more personal somehow. Echo suddenly flapped his wings agitatedly. Not safe, he squawked. Richardson warned. Not safe. Eleanor's eyes widened at the bird's outburst. What else has he been saying? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily recounted all of Echo's strange utterances over the past week, ending with the repeated phrase about the safe behind the painting. With each word, her mother seemed to grow more agitated. We should return the bird, Eleanor said abruptly. Take the money, Lily. We need it for my treatments, and we don't need trouble from people like the Blackwoods. But something doesn't feel right, Lily protested. Blackwood seemed too desperate, too insistent, and Echo gets distressed whenever I mention taking him back. Eleanor looked away, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her blanket. Some things are better left alone, Lily. The Blackwoods have power in this town, power that goes beyond their money. That night, Lily lay awake, Echo sleeping in his basket beside her bed. The sea. Parrot had refused to be separated from her since she'd returned home, as if sensing her dilemma. The sensible thing would be to return the bird, take the money, and forget the whole strange encounter. Yet something deeper, an instinct she couldn't ignore, told her that Echo had come into her life for a reason. As dawn broke, Lily made her decision. She would call Blackwood and arrange to bring Echo to the estate herself, using the opportunity to observe the man in his own environment before making a final decision. The call was brief, with Blackwood barely containing his eagerness. He instructed her to come to the estate that afternoon, adding that they would discuss payment upon the bird's safe return. I'll have my assistant meet you at the main gate, he said smoothly. And, Miss Morgan, I appreciate your discretion in this matter. The Blackwood estate loomed imposingly against the afternoon sky as Lily drove her aging pickup truck along the winding private road. Echo, secure in a small travel cage, had grown increasingly agitated as they approached, squawking frantically. It's okay, Echo, Lily soothed, though her own nerves were frayed. I'm just going to talk to him, see what this is all about. A stern-faced man in a dark suit met her at the ornate iron gates, introducing himself only as Mr. Hayes. He led her through manicured gardens to an imposing mansion that seemed to blend Victorian grandeur with modern luxury. Mr. Blackwood will see you in the conservatory, Hayes informed her, leading Lily through a maze of richly decorated hallways. The interior of the mansion was a testament to wealth and refined taste, with original artwork adorning every wall and antique furniture placed with deliberate precision. As they passed through what appeared to be a study, Echo suddenly went wild, thrashing against the cage bars. "The safe, behind painting, behind painting!" he screeched repeatedly. Lily froze, her eyes instinctively scanning the room. There, above an antique desk, hung a large oil painting of a coastal landscape. Hayes's expression darkened as he roughly took the cage from Lily's hands. "The bird is distressed," he said coldly. "Best to get him to Mr. Blackwood immediately." The conservatory was a glass-enclosed paradise filled with rare plants and exotic flowers that would have delighted Lily under different circumstances. Alexander Blackwood sat waiting, dressed impeccably in a casual yet clearly expensive outfit. "Miss Morgan," he greeted her, rising from his seat. Is His eyes immediately fixed on the agitated Parrot. "And my dear Echo, how wonderful to have you home." Echo went silent at the sight of Blackwood, shrinking to the far corner of his cage. The reaction wasn't lost on Lily. "He doesn't seem very happy to see you," she observed. A tight smile crossed Blackwood's face. "As I said, he's been through a trauma. It will take time for him to readjust." He turned to Hayes. "Take Echo to his usual place. Make sure he's comfortable." Lily stepped forward. "Actually, I'd like to see where he'll be kept before I leave." "Him?" Something dangerous flashed in Blackwood's eyes before he smoothly covered it with a charming smile. "Of course. Hayes, please show Miss Morgan to the aviary." He reached for a checkbook on a nearby table. "While we walk, we can discuss your compensation." The aviary turned out to be a spacious, climate-controlled room filled with plants and several perches, though conspicuously devoid of other birds. Everything looked perfectly appropriate, yet Lily couldn't shake her unease, especially when Echo refused to leave his cage, even when the door was opened. "He seems reluctant," Lily noted. "He'll adjust," Blackwood replied dismissively. "Now, about your reward." As he began writing a check, Lily found her gaze wandering to a door visible through the glass walls of the aviary. It appeared to lead to a study similar to the one they had passed earlier. Her heart raced as she noticed a large painting hanging on the far wall. "Actually, Mr. Blackwood," she said suddenly, "I think I'd like some time to say goodbye to Echo. I've grown quite attached to him." Blackwood's pen stilled on the checkbook. "Is that really necessary, Miss Morgan?" "It is to me," Lily insisted. "Just 5 minutes alone with him." After a moment of tense silence, Blackwood nodded stiffly. "Very well. Hayes will be right outside the door. 5 minutes." When they left, Lily immediately approached Echo's cage. "Is this where you came from?" she whispered. The parrot's eyes seemed to hold a human-like intelligence as he repeated in a hushed tone, "Not safe." Richardson warned. A strange impulse seized Lily. She pulled out her phone and quickly snapped several photos of the aviary and through the glass walls what she could see of the study beyond, including the painting. Then, following an instinct she didn't fully understand, she removed the small ribbon from her hair and tied it discreetly around one of Echo's leg bands, a small, personal marker. "I'll figure this out," she promised the bird. "Whatever's happening here, I won't abandon you." Moments later, Hayes reappeared. "Your time is up, Miss Morgan." As Lily was escorted back to the conservatory, she noticed Blackwood engaged in a tense conversation with another man. Their voices were low, but the words journalist and problem drifted toward her. Blackwood's expression was thunderous, a stark contrast to the polished demeanor he presented to her. When he noticed her presence, his face immediately transformed back into a mask of cordial hospitality. "Ah, Miss Morgan, I trust you've said your goodbyes." The check he handed her was for $15,000, $5,000 more than his original offer. The gesture, rather than reassuring her, only intensified Lily's suspicions. "This is very generous," she said, reluctantly accepting the check. "I believe in rewarding those who assist me," Blackwood replied smoothly. "And I hope this concludes our business together." The words held a subtle warning that wasn't lost on Lily. As Hayes escorted her back to her truck, she felt Blackwood's gaze following her, calculating and cold. The drive home was filled with conflicting emotions. The check in her purse could solve so many problems: her mother's medical bills, repairs for the cottage, new supplies for the shop. Yet the memory of Echo's distress and the strange phrases he had shared weighed heavily on her conscience. When she arrived home, Eleanor was waiting anxiously in her usual spot by the window. "Did you return the bird?" she asked immediately. Lily nodded, showing her mother the check. Blackwood even added an extra $5,000. Instead of looking relieved, Eleanor's expression grew more troubled. "He wants to make sure you don't ask questions," she murmured, almost to herself. "Mum, what do you know about the Blackwoods?" Lily asked directly. "And don't tell me it's just what everyone in town knows. Your reaction was personal." Eleanor sighed deeply, her fingers fidgeting with her blanket. "It's not a simple story, Lily." "I have time," Lily replied, settling into the chair across from her mother. After a long moment of silence, Eleanor began to speak. "Before you were born, I worked as a housekeeper at Blackwood Estate. Your father was their gardener." The revelation stunned Lily. "You never told me you worked for the Blackwoods." "There was no reason to," Eleanor said softly. "After your father disappeared, I wanted nothing to do with that place or those people." Lily's father had abandoned them when she was just 3 years old, or so she'd always been told. The mention of his disappearance in connection with the Blackwood sent a chill down her spine. "What happened, Mom?" Eleanor's gaze drifted to the window, toward the distant hill where Blackwood Estate stood. "Your father found something he wasn't supposed to find, something in Alexander's father's study. He told me about it the night before he disappeared. Something about documents hidden in a safe behind a painting." Lily gasped. "That's exactly what Echo keeps saying." "I know," Eleanor whispered. "When you first mentioned it, I couldn't believe it. After all these years, what was in those documents?" "I don't know. Your father said it was better I didn't know the details, for my safety. He was going to take what he found to a journalist friend of his, someone named Richardson. But then—" her voice trailed off, thick with unshed tears. "And the next day he was gone," Lily finished, the pieces starting to fit together in her mind. Eleanor nodded. "The official story was that he'd abandoned us, run off with another woman. The Blackwoods even produced letters, supposedly from him, but I never believed it. Your father would never have left us voluntarily." A cold realization washed over Lily. "Mom, do you think the Blackwoods had something to do with Dad's disappearance?" Eleanor's silence was answer enough. That night, sleep eluded Lily as her mind raced with questions. The same name kept repeating in her thoughts: Richardson. Echo had mentioned this name multiple times, always in connection with warnings. If Richardson was her father's journalist friend, perhaps he knew something that could help unravel this mystery. The next morning, Lily awoke to a strange sound outside her window. Looking out, she found a rock wrapped in paper thrown onto the porch. The message, written in crude block letters, was chillingly direct. "Cash the check and forget the bird. Final warning." Heart pounding, Lily pulled out her phone to check. The photos she'd taken at Blackwood Estate. The images of the aviary were there, but what caught her eye was something she hadn't noticed in the moment. A reflection in one of the glass panels, showing part of the study, including a corner of the painting and what appeared to be a subtle outline in the wall behind it, exactly where a safe might be hidden. As she stared at the image, her phone suddenly chimed with a news alert from the local paper. Local journalist Jason Richardson found after week-long disappearance, claims memory loss. The name hit Lily like a physical blow. Richardson was alive and had recently reappeared after a mysterious absence. This couldn't be coincidence. With trembling fingers, Lily dialed the number for the Pinecrest Gazette, the small local newspaper where, according to the article, Jason Richardson worked. She needed answers, and she was increasingly certain that Alexander Blackwood and his secrets were connected to her father's disappearance 15 years ago. As the phone rang, Lily glanced at the threatening note again and made a decision. She would not be intimidated. For her father's memory, for her mother's peace of mind, and for Echo's strange, desperate warnings, she would pursue the truth, wherever it might lead. Pinecrest Gazette, Richardson speaking. The voice that answered Lily's call sounded tired and strained, nothing like what she had expected from a recently found missing person. She hesitated, suddenly unsure how to begin. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The journalist's impatience cut through her uncertainty. "Mr. Richardson," Lily began, her voice steadier than she felt. "My name is Lily Morgan. I believe you knew my father, Thomas Morgan, about 15 years ago." The silence that followed was so prolonged that Lily thought the call had disconnected. Finally, Richardson spoke, his voice noticeably lower. "I'm not taking interviews about my disappearance. The paper already published everything I have to say." "This isn't about your disappearance," Lily pressed. "It's about my father's, and it might be connected to Alexander Blackwood." Another long pause. Then, "Meet me at Joey's diner in 20 minutes. Come alone and don't tell anyone about this conversation." The line went dead before Lily could respond. She stared at her phone, heart racing. Richardson's reaction confirmed her suspicions. He knew something, and that knowledge frightened him. Joey's diner sat on the outskirts of Pinecrest, a retro-styled establishment that had seen better days. When Lily entered, the lunch crowd had thinned, leaving only a few patrons scattered among the worn vinyl booths. A man in his 50s with disheveled grey hair and haunted eyes sat in the farthest corner, hunched over a coffee cup. He didn't look up as Lily approached, but his posture tensed. "Mr. Richardson," Lily slid into the booth across from him. The journalist raised his head, studying her face with bloodshot eyes. "You look like your father," he said finally. "Same determined expression." The comment caught Lily off guard. She'd been told many times that she resembled her mother, but no one had ever mentioned a similarity to the father she barely remembered. "How well did you know him?" she asked, leaning forward. Richardson glanced around nervously before answering. "Tom and I were investigating something together before he disappeared. Something big." He took a sip of coffee, his hand trembling slightly. "Then he vanished, and I was warned to drop the story. I did. Until last month, when an anonymous package arrived at my desk. Old documents that reignited everything. And then you disappeared," Lily concluded. "Just like my father." Richardson's gaze sharpened. "What made you call me today, after all?" "These years?" Lily hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Finally, she decided on the truth, or at least part of it. "I found an injured parrot in the woods. It belonged to Alexander Blackwood, and it kept repeating strange phrases about a safe behind a painting and warnings about someone named Richardson. When I returned the bird, Blackwood's behavior was unsettling." The journalist paled visibly. "You returned the bird to Blackwood, and you're walking around town openly meeting with me?" He pushed away his coffee cup. "You've put yourself in danger, Miss Morgan, more than you realize. What exactly were you and my father investigating?" Richardson rubbed his temples, looking even wearier. "The Blackwood family's businesses have a pristine public image: real estate, investment banking, art collection. But we found evidence suggesting their fortune was built on more than legitimate enterprise. Document forgery, particularly in the art world, valuable pieces with questionable provenance, historical items that disappeared from European collections during wartime." Lily frowned. "Art forgery? That doesn't seem worth threatening people over." "We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars," Richardson explained. "And worse, connections to powerful people who use the Blackwood services to hide their own dirty money. Your father found evidence in their house, documents, photographs, ledgers that could have brought down not just the Blackwoods, but several prominent families. How did he get access to these documents?" "He was their gardener, but he wasn't just a gardener. Before moving to Pinecrest, your father worked security for an insurance company that specialized in art recovery. He knew what to look for, and he had skills most gardeners don't." This revelation stunned Lily. Her mother had never mentioned her father's previous career, painting him simply as a man who loved working with plants and the earth. "The night before he disappeared," Richardson continued, lowering his voice further, "he called me, said he'd found something in James Blackwood's study, Alexander's father. Something behind a painting. He was going to make copies of everything and bring them to me, but he never showed up. And now, 15 years later, You received anonymous documents that related to the same investigation, Lily asked. Richardson nodded grimly. I started looking into it again quietly. 3 days later, I was grabbed outside my apartment. Next thing I know, I woke up in a motel room 50 miles from here with no memory of the previous week. He pulled up his sleeve, revealing a small bandage. Needle mark. They drugged me, kept me sedated somewhere, and made sure I understood the message. But you're still talking to me, Lily pointed out. A ghost of a smile crossed Richardson's face. I'm not as easily intimidated as I was 15 years ago, and there's something they don't know. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. I made copies and stored them securely before they grabbed me. Insurance, if you will. Lily eyed the flash drive. What's on there? Partial evidence. Not enough to build a full case, but enough to show there's truth to the allegations. What your father found would have completed the puzzle. Richardson's expression darkened, which is why I think they made sure he couldn't deliver it. The implication hung heavily in the air. Lily had grown up believing her father had abandoned them. Now she was facing the possibility that something far worse had happened and that the Blackwoods were responsible. I need to see what's on that drive, Lily said firmly. Richardson hesitated, then slid the flash drive across the table. Look at it somewhere safe, not at home, not at your shop. And Miss Morgan, be extremely careful. The fact that Blackwood's Parrot was spouting these phrases suggests your father might have confronted him before disappearing. The bird heard things, important things. But why would Blackwood keep a parrot that repeats such damaging information? Exotic birds live for decades. This one probably belonged to James Blackwood originally. Alexander may not have realized what the bird knew until it escaped. Richardson stood abruptly. I need to go. If anyone asks, we discussed my disappearance for a human interest story you're writing for your blog. As he turned to leave, Lily called after him. Wait, how do I contact you if I find something? Richardson scribbled a number on a napkin. Burner phone, text only, no calls. And Lily, he paused, his expression grave. Watch your mother. If they think you're digging into this, they might use her to get to you. The warning sent a chill through Lily as she watched the journalist hurry out of the diner. Only then did she notice a man sitting at the counter who seemed too interested in his newspaper, his coffee untouched. When their eyes briefly met, he quickly looked away and dropped some bills on the counter before leaving. Had she and Richardson been observed? The possibility made Lily's skin crawl. She slipped the flash drive into her pocket and paid for Richardson's abandoned coffee before exiting the diner through the back door, just in case. That afternoon, rather than returning home or to her shop, Lily drove to the public library in the next town over. The small facility offered private computer stations that would allow her to view the contents of the flash drive without risk of being monitored. The librarian, a middle-aged woman with curious eyes, seemed surprised to see an out-of-towner in the middle of a weekday, but she directed Lily to an available computer in a quiet corner without questions. With nervous fingers, Lily inserted the flash drive. It contained multiple folders, meticulously labeled by date. She opened the most recent one, finding a collection of scanned documents, photographs, and what appeared to be financial records dating back 30 years. The earliest documents detailed transactions by James Blackwood, Alexander's father, with references to pieces that Lily vaguely recognized as having been reported stolen during World War II. More recent files showed communications between Alexander and various international clients, the language carefully coded, but clearly referring to artworks of questionable origins. One photograph in particular caught her attention, a group of men standing in what appeared to be Blackwood's study, the same painting from Echo's warnings visible in the background. Among the faces, Lily recognized a younger Alexander Blackwood, and to her shock, her own father. Thomas Morgan stood slightly apart from the group. his expression serious as he observed rather than participated in what appeared to be a celebration. The timestamp on the photo placed it just 3 weeks before his disappearance. As Lily dug deeper, she discovered spreadsheets tracking payments to various officials, including several local politicians and even the former sheriff of Pinecrest County. The pattern was clear. The Blackwoods had been buying protection and influence for decades. A document near the bottom of the folder made her heart stop. It was a police report marked confidential regarding an abandoned vehicle found at the bottom of Coldwater Lake, just 10 miles outside Pinecrest. The car had been discovered during a drought that had lowered the lake's water level, but the report noted that no body was found, and the case was mysteriously closed without further investigation. The vehicle's registration, Thomas Morgan. Lily's hands shook as she stared at the screen. The report was dated just 1 year ago, which meant the truth about her father's disappearance had been discovered and subsequently buried by local authorities. Authorities who, according to the financial records, were on the Blackwood payroll. She quickly copied the most damning files to her phone, then carefully removed the flash drive. The magnitude of what she'd discovered was overwhelming. This wasn't just about art forgery or financial crimes. This was about power and corruption deep enough to conceal a possible murder. As Lily walked to her truck, she noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked nearby, its engine running. Instinctively, she changed direction, walking past her vehicle, toward a coffee shop across the street. Through the reflection in the shop window, she saw the SUV slowly pull away from the curb, following her. She was being watched. With her heart pounding, Lily ducked into the coffee shop and immediately headed for the restroom. There, she sent a hasty text to Richardson's burner phone. Found car report, need to talk, being followed. His response came seconds later. Ditch phone, they can track it. Go to the lighthouse, ask for Margaret. The lighthouse. Lily frowned, trying to recall if there was a business by that name in the area. Then it clicked. The old abandoned lighthouse at Pebble Point, a local landmark that had been out of commission for decades. Before leaving the restroom, Lily removed the battery from her phone, rendering it untraceable. Then she slipped out. The coffee shop's back exit, which opened into an alley connecting to a small shopping center. She weaved through stores, constantly checking for followers, before finally circling back to her truck from a different direction. The black SUV was nowhere in sight, but Lily knew better than to assume she'd lost them completely. As she drove toward Pebble Point, she took a convoluted route, making random turns and doubling back several times to ensure she wasn't being followed. The old lighthouse stood stark against the darkening sky, its once white paint peeling to reveal weathered stone beneath. It had been a tourist attraction decades ago, but funding cuts had left it abandoned and somewhat forgotten. As Lily approached the dilapidated structure, she wondered if Richardson had sent her on a wild goose chase. The door, surprisingly, was unlocked. She entered cautiously, the fading daylight barely penetrating the dusty interior. "Hello?" she called out hesitantly. "Margaret?" A figure emerged from the shadows of a spiral staircase, an elderly woman with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. "You must be Lily," the woman said, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. "Jason said you might come." "Who are you?" Lily asked, still hovering near the exit. "My name is Margaret Richardson. Jason is my son." The woman gestured for Lily to follow her up the stairs. "And I knew your father. He was a good man who stumbled onto something very dangerous." As they climbed the winding staircase to the top of the lighthouse, Margaret explained that she had been a housekeeper for the Blackwoods before Eleanor, working there for nearly 30 years. "I saw 3 generations of that family build their empire on lies and intimidation," she said bitterly. Your father was investigating them with Jason's help. When he disappeared, I knew exactly what had happened, but there was no way to prove it. They reached the top room, once the home of the lighthouse's powerful beam, but now empty, except for some old furniture, a table, chairs, and a filing cabinet that looked surprisingly new. This has been my son's secret office for years, Margaret explained, opening the cabinet to reveal files, a laptop, and various electronic equipment. The Blackwoods would never think to look here. It's the perfect blind spot, a decrepit landmark everyone ignores. Richardson said to ask you about the lighthouse, Lily said, still trying to process everything. I didn't realize it was an actual lighthouse. Margaret's smile was grim. That's the point. Now tell me what you found, and let's figure out how to keep you alive long enough to expose Alexander Blackwood for what he truly is. As night fell over Pinecrest, Lily shared everything she'd discovered, including Echo's strange warnings and the police report about her father's car. Margaret listened intently, occasionally nodding as pieces of a decades-old puzzle finally began to fit together. The car confirms what I suspected, the older woman said softly. But without a body, there's still reasonable doubt. And without the original documents your father found, we can't conclusively tie the Blackwoods to his disappearance or their criminal enterprise. All those documents would be in the safe, Lily concluded, behind the painting in Blackwood's study, exactly where Echo said they would be. Which means, Margaret said gravely, the only way to get justice for your father and protect yourself is to somehow access that safe. The realization settled heavily between them. Lily would need to return to Blackwood Estate, the very heart of danger, if she ever hoped to uncover the complete truth. There might be a way, she said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. The town's annual charity gala is being held at Blackwood Estate next week. My flower shop is providing some of the arrangements. I could use that as cover to get inside. Margaret's expression was a mixture of admiration and concern. It's risky, but it might be our only chance. Alexander Blackwood has evaded justice for too long. She reached into the filing cabinet and pulled out a small device. This is a specialized camera disguised as a brooch. Wear it when you go. If you find those documents, we need visual evidence before they can disappear again. As Lily accepted the camera, a message alert sounded from Margaret's laptop. She opened it to find an encrypted email from Richardson. Elle's mother, hospitalized. Suspected poisoning. Not accidental. They're making their move. The world seemed to tilt beneath Lily's feet. Her mother, the warning Richardson had given her just hours ago, echoed in her mind. They had already gotten to Eleanor. I need to go, Lily gasped, already moving toward the stairs. They've hurt my mother. Margaret grabbed her arm. Wait! That's exactly what they want, for you to rush to the hospital where they can find you. You need to be smart about this. That's my mother, Lily protested, tears threatening. And Thomas was my friend, Margaret countered firmly. Listen to me. Go to the hospital, but not as yourself. I have clothes, a wig, glasses, enough to get you past casual observation. You check on your mother, but you don't identify yourself to staff, and you leave immediately after. Then you come back here, where it's safe. Lily wanted to argue, but the logic was undeniable. The Blackwoods had escalated from threats to action. Her mother was suffering because of her investigation, and Lily herself was undoubtedly in danger. Okay, she agreed reluctantly, her voice breaking. Help me disguise myself. As Margaret quickly transformed her appearance with a short dark wig and oversized glasses, Lily steeled herself for what was to come. The stakes had risen dramatically, and there would be no turning back. Whatever secret lay hidden in Alexander Blackwood's safe, it was worth hurting innocent people to protect, which meant it was exactly what Lily needed to bring the powerful family to justice. With her mother's life hanging in the balance and her own safety compromised, Lily realized that Echo's appearance in her life had been no accident. The parrot's cryptic messages hadn't just been random mimicry, they had been her father's final attempt to reveal the truth, echoing across 15 years of silence. Pinecrest Community Hospital was a small facility with only 2 floors and a staff that knew most patients by name. Lily approached the reception desk with her heart hammering in her chest, the dark wig and glasses feeling like flimsy protection against discovery. "I'm here to see Eleanor Morgan," she said, pitching her voice slightly higher than normal. "I'm her niece from Burlington." The receptionist barely glanced up from her computer. "Room 204, but visiting hours end in 45 minutes. Lily hurried through the corridors, scanning constantly for Hayes or any other Blackwood associates. When she reached her mother's room, she hesitated. Outside the door, steeling herself before entering. Eleanor lay pale and still against the white hospital sheets, an IV dripping steadily into her arm. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than even her illness had made her. Lily moved quietly to her bedside, taking her mother's hand gently. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open, confusion shifting to recognition despite Lily's disguise. "Lily? What are you doing dressed like that?" "Shh, Mom," Lily whispered, glancing nervously toward the door. "I need you to listen. Did anyone bring you food or drinks before you got sick? Anyone unusual visit the house?" Eleanor frowned, her thoughts clearly muddled. "The medication. For my condition. There was a new prescription. The pharmacy delivered it yesterday morning." "Did you check with Dr. Mitchell about a new prescription?" Eleanor shook her head weakly. "I assumed he had called it in. The delivery person had all the right paperwork from our usual pharmacy." Anger flared in Lily's chest. The Blackwoods had used her mother's existing illness as cover, sending tampered medication that would appear to be just a worsening of her condition. It was calculated, cruel, and worst of all, nearly impossible to prove. "Mom, I need to go." "Away for a little while," Lily said, squeezing her mother's hand. "I'm going to ask Mrs. Henderson to stay with you when you're released. Don't take any medication unless it comes directly from Dr. Mitchell's hand. Do you understand?" Eleanor's eyes sharpened with sudden clarity. "This is about the parrot, isn't it? About what's in that safe?" It wasn't a question. "Your father, he tried to protect us from this." "I know, Mom. And now, I'm going to finish what he started." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Excuse me, but we need to run some tests on Mrs. Morgan now." Lily leaned down and kissed her mother's forehead. "I love you. Stay strong." As she turned to leave, Eleanor caught her wrist with surprising strength. "The attic," she whispered urgently. "Check the attic at home. Southeast corner, under the floorboards. He left something there just in case." The nurse was getting impatient. "Miss, you'll need to leave now." Lily nodded, gently freeing herself from her mother's grip. "I'll come back soon," she promised, though both of them knew it might not be that simple. In the hospital parking lot, Lily spotted Hayes leaning against a black sedan, scanning everyone who exited the building. She ducked her head and walked in the opposite direction, her pulse racing. Once she'd put enough distance between them, she called a local taxi service from a payphone and directed the driver to drop her off 1/2 mile from her home. Night had fallen completely by the time. Lily approached the cottage from the back, through the woods rather than the main road. She peered through the windows before entering, confirming the house was empty, but noting with alarm that someone had clearly searched it. Drawers left partially open, cushions slightly askew, items not quite where she had left them. Moving silently, Lily headed for the attic access in the hallway ceiling. The pull-down ladder creaked ominously as she climbed into the dusty space above. The attic was mostly empty, save for Christmas decorations and old furniture, illuminated only by the beam of her flashlight. The southeast corner revealed nothing obvious, but when Lily tapped the floorboards, one sounded different. Using a screwdriver, From her pocket, she pried up the loose board to find a small metal box nestled in the insulation below. Inside was a single key with no markings and a sealed envelope addressed simply, "For Lily, when the time comes." With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the yellowed paper inside. The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet somehow felt deeply personal. Her father's words, written 15 years ago. "My dearest Lily, if you're reading this, then my fears have been realized and you've become entangled in the dangerous web I tried to shield you from. The Blackwoods are not what they appear. Their wealth and status are built on forgery, theft and exploitation. I've gathered evidence that could expose them, but I fear I may not live to present it. I've hidden duplicates of the most damning documents in a place they'd never think to look within plain sight at their own estate. The third painting from the left in the main hall, a seascape, is my work. I created it during my time as their gardener, and James Blackwood hung it among his collection as a patronizing gesture. Behind the canvas, in a cavity I carved into the frame itself, you'll find microfilm containing everything I discovered. The key enclosed opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Burlington, upper 713. Inside is enough supplementary evidence to corroborate what's on the microfilm. Be careful who you trust. The Blackwoods' influence reaches further than you might imagine. I love you and your mother more than anything in this world. Whatever you might have been told about my disappearance, know that I would never have left you willingly. All my love, always. Dad. Lily read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Her father's voice seemed to reach across time, confirming everything she had begun to suspect. He hadn't abandoned them. He had been silenced while trying to protect them. The sound of a car engine outside snapped her back to the present. Quickly, she pocketed the key and letter, replaced the floorboard, and descended from the attic. Through the front window, she saw a familiar black SUV pulling into her driveway. There was no time to waste. Grabbing only her wallet and a jacket, Lily slipped out the back door and disappeared into the woods just as headlights swept across the front of the cottage. She made her way back to the lighthouse by a circuitous route, constantly checking for pursuers. Margaret was waiting anxiously, relief visible on her face, when Lily stepped through the door. "Thank goodness," the older woman said. "Jason texted that Hayes was at the hospital. I was worried they'd found you." "They searched my house," Lily replied, still catching her breath, "and they came back while I was there, but I found something, a letter from my father." She showed Margaret the letter and key, watching as the woman's expression shifted from curiosity to astonishment. "This changes everything," Margaret said finally. "If Thomas hid evidence within the Blackwood estate itself, and there's corroborating material in that safety deposit box." She looked up at Lily with newfound determination. "We need to get to Burlington tomorrow to see what's in that box. Then we'll figure out how to access the painting during the charity gala." They spent the night planning, with Jason Richardson joining them via encrypted video call. The journalist had gone into hiding after learning of Eleanor's hospitalization, aware that the Blackwoods would be watching him closely. "The gala is in 3 days," he reminded them. "Security will be tight, but also stretched thin with so many guests. Lily's position as the florist gives her legitimate access during setup, but navigating to the main hall and extracting the evidence undetected will be challenging." I can create a diversion," Margaret offered. "I still have friends among the household staff. With the right incentive, they might help." As dawn broke, their plan was set. Lily would travel with Margaret to Burlington that day to access the safety deposit box. Then during the charity gala, she would use her role as the florist to gain entry to the estate early, locate her father's painting, and extract the hidden microfilm. The First National Bank of Burlington was an imposing structure of marble and brass that made Lily feel conspicuously out of place in her simple clothes. The manager, however, was professional and discreet, leading her to a private room after verifying the key and her identification. Safety deposit box number 7113 contained a sealed waterproof pouch holding multiple USB drives, a small notebook filled with dates, names and amounts, and photographs showing various artifacts with documentation that Lily recognized as forgeries based on Richardson's explanations. Most shocking was a CD labeled Insurance with a handwritten note, audio recording J. Blackwood and A. Blackwood, discussing T. Morgan's situation, made day before disappearance. Lily's hands shook as she collected everything into her bag. Her father had been more thorough than anyone could have imagined, documenting not just the Blackwoods' art fraud, but potentially evidence related to his own disappearance. "We need to get this to Richardson immediately," she told Margaret as they left the bank. "If that recording contains what I think it does." "It could be the smoking gun," Margaret finished grimly. "But remember, the microfilm is still crucial. Whatever your father hid in that painting frame must be significant enough that he couldn't risk including it here." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Lily maintained contact with the hospital, relieved to hear that her mother was recovering and would be released soon. She arranged for Mrs. Henderson to stay at the cottage with Eleanor, cited a family emergency to explain her own absence, and focused on preparing for the charity gala. The morning of the event, Lily arrived at Blackwood Estate with her delivery van filled with flower arrangements. She wore the camera brooch Margaret had given her, disguised as a simple decorative pin. Her heart threatened to burst from her chest as Hayes checked her name against the vendor list at the gate. "You're early, Miss Morgan," he noted, his eyes cold and suspicious. "The roses need time to open properly in the warmth," she explained with a professional smile she didn't feel. "And I need to ensure the arrangements are perfect for Mr. Blackwood's special guests." Hayes seemed to accept this, waving her through with a curt nod. Lily drove to the service entrance as instructed, where staff were bustling to prepare for the evening's festivities. No one paid much attention to the florist as she unloaded her arrangements and began placing them according to the event planner's instructions. Gradually, Lily worked her way toward the main hall, carrying an elaborate centerpiece that required special placement. The corridor was momentarily empty, giving her the opportunity she needed. The third painting from the left, a seascape showing a lighthouse on a rocky coast, hung exactly where her father had described. With a quick glance to ensure she was alone, Lily set down her arrangement and approached the painting. Up close, she could see the brush strokes, the subtle techniques that marked it as her father's work. Emotion threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. The painting was secured to the wall with standard, hanging hardware. Carefully, Lily lifted it from its hooks, turning it over to examine the frame. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about it, until she ran her fingers along the bottom edge and felt a slight inconsistency in the wood. Pressing gently, a small section of the frame slid aside, revealing a hollow cavity containing a metal canister no larger than a lipstick tube. Hands trembling with anticipation, Lily extracted the canister and slipped it into her pocket. She had just rehung the painting when a voice behind her made her blood freeze. "Admiring the artwork, Miss Morgan." Alexander Blackwood stood at the end of the hallway, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Hayes watched her with naked suspicion. "I was just looking for the best spot for this arrangement," Lily replied, gesturing to the centerpiece on the floor. "The lighting in this hall is perfect for bringing out the colors in the roses." Blackwood approached slowly, his gaze never leaving her face. "Interesting choice of location. This particular painting isn't one of our more valuable pieces. In fact, it was created by a former employee, a gardener with artistic aspirations." "It's beautiful," Lily said honestly. "There's something honest about it, more so than some of the more famous works I've seen." A strange expression flickered across Blackwood's face. "You have your father's eye for authenticity, Miss Morgan. a rare quality in today's world. The direct reference to her father sent a jolt through Lily. Blackwood was making it clear he knew exactly who she was, who her father had been, and possibly what she was doing there. "I should continue with the setups," she said, bending to lift. "The flower arrangement. There's still much to do before your guests arrive." "Of course." Blackwood stepped aside, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. "Hayes will escort you to ensure you have everything you need." It was a polite way of saying she would be watched for the remainder of her time at the estate. Lily nodded graciously, her mind racing to formulate a new plan for getting out with the microfilm canister safely hidden in her pocket. As she worked through the remaining setups, Hayes never more than a few steps away, Lily noticed increased security activity throughout the mansion. Additional guards took positions at every entrance, and she overheard staff being instructed to report any unusual behavior immediately. Her opportunity came when a delivery truck arrived with the ice sculptures, creating momentary chaos in the kitchen area. During the confusion, Lily slipped into a bathroom, locked the door, and quickly transferred the microfilm canister into a hollowed-out tube of lipstick she had prepared for this purpose. After carefully applying some of the remaining lipstick, she flushed the evidence, took a deep breath, and returned to work. Hayes was waiting outside, his expression darkening when he saw her. "The bathroom, Miss Morgan. I don't recall giving you permission to wander off." "I wasn't aware I needed permission for basic human functions," Lily replied calmly, though her heart was racing. "Would you prefer I discuss my personal needs in more detail?" Hayes's face reddened slightly, but he merely gestured for her to continue with her work. The remaining hour passed in tense silence as Lily completed the final arrangements, painfully aware of the precious evidence concealed in her makeup bag and the increasingly suspicious security presence around her. When she finally loaded her empty containers back into the van, Lily could feel eyes watching her from every direction. She drove away from Blackwood Estate with forced casualness, fighting the urge to speed. Only when the gates disappeared from her rearview mirror did she allow herself a shaky exhale. She had done it. Retrieved the evidence her father had hidden 15 years ago, right under the Blackwoods' noses. Now she just had to make it back to the lighthouse without being followed. As Lily navigated the winding roads leading away from the estate, she noticed a vehicle maintaining a consistent distance behind her. Too consistent to be coincidence. Her suspicion was confirmed when she made a deliberate wrong turn and the car followed. "So much for a clean getaway," she muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The rural roads of Pinecrest offered limited options for losing a tail. Thinking quickly, Lily turned toward the town's center rather than the isolated lighthouse. If she was going to be confronted, better to have witnesses around. The farmers' market would be in full swing, crowded, chaotic with multiple exits, perfect for what she needed to do. She parked her van in the public lot and walked briskly toward the market, noting with a mixture of fear and satisfaction that two men from the following car were now trailing her on foot. The market was indeed packed with Saturday shoppers. Lily weaved through the crowd, occasionally glancing back to confirm her pursuers were still there. They were, getting closer in fact. She needed to act fast. Approaching a familiar face, the teenage son of her mother's friend who worked at a produce stall, Lily leaned in with an urgent whisper, "Danny, I need your help. 2 men are following me. Can I go out through your back exit? It's important." Danny, always up for excitement, nodded quickly. "Sure thing, Miss Morgan. Go through. The storage tent behind our stall. It leads to the alley." With a grateful smile, Lily ducked behind the stall and through the canvas flap of the storage tent. As promised, it opened to a narrow alley behind the market. Without hesitation, she broke into a run, heading for the maze of small streets. In Pinecrest's Old Town district, she had a significant head start, but Lily knew her pursuers wouldn't give up easily. After several blocks, she ducked into the back entrance of Mabel's Cafe, where she'd worked during high school summers. Mabel herself stood behind the counter, her eyebrows rising in surprise at Lily's breathless entrance. "Mabel, I need a favor," Lily gasped. "Can I use your phone and go out the front door in a minute?" The older woman, known for her no-nonsense attitude and fierce loyalty to her kids, nodded without question. "Take my car too," she said, sliding keys across the counter. "Blue Subaru. In the employee spot. Return it when you can." Grateful beyond words, Lily called Margaret from the cafe's landline, arranging to meet at a secondary location rather than the lighthouse. Then, with a quick hug for Mabel, she slipped out the front door and into the waiting Subaru. 20 minutes later, she pulled into the abandoned gas station outside town where Margaret waited in a rental car. After transferring to Margaret's vehicle, they took a convoluted route back to the lighthouse, confident they had finally lost their trackers. Richardson was already there, having driven through the night from his hiding place 3 towns over. His face was tense with anticipation as Lily produced both the microfilm canister and the contents of the safety deposit box. "Let's see what your father risked everything to preserve," he said, setting up equipment to view the microfilm. The images were stunning in their detail and implication. Transaction records, correspondence, photographs documenting the Blackwoods' decades-long involvement in art forgery, theft, and money laundering. There were lists of wealthy clients, corrupt officials, and amounts paid for services rendered. But the most damning evidence was contained on the audio CD. Richardson transferred the file to his laptop, and they gathered around to listen. "He knows too much, Alexander." Morgan found the real invoices. The older voice, presumably James Blackwood, sounded agitated. "The gardener? How?" Alexander's younger voice replied. "Doesn't matter. What matters is he's planning to meet with that journalist friend of his tomorrow." "Richardson, what do you suggest?" "Handle it tonight. Make it look like he left town willingly, and find whatever evidence he's collected." I'm talking about protecting this family, Alexander. You said you were ready to take over the business someday. Consider this your first real test. The recording continued, detailing the plan to force Thomas Morgan to reveal the location of his evidence before making him disappear. Alexander Blackwood had not just been aware of what happened to Lily's father, he had been directly involved. Lily sat in stunned silence as the recording ended. The theory that had been building in her mind, that the Blackwoods were responsible for her father's disappearance, was now confirmed in the most brutal way possible. Alexander Blackwood, the man she had faced just hours ago, had personally handled her father. "This is enough," Richardson said finally, breaking the heavy silence. "With this evidence, we can take down the Blackwoods and everyone connected to them. The police may be in their pocket locally, but I have contacts at the federal level who would be very interested in this." "No," Lily said firmly, surprising herself with her resolve. "Not yet. There's one more thing we need to do." Margaret and Richardson looked at her questioningly. "I want to confront Blackwood publicly," Lily explained, a plan forming in her mind. "Tonight at his own charity gala, surrounded by the very people he's been deceiving and manipulating for years. If we just take this to the authorities, his lawyers will spin and delay for months. But if we expose him in front of the community with irrefutable evidence, it's too dangerous," Margaret protested. "He's already tried to silence you through your mother. Now that you've taken the microfilm, he'll be desperate." "Which is exactly why we need to act now, before he realizes what we have," Lily countered. "The gala is the perfect opportunity. Every important person in the county will be there. Politicians, business leaders, the press. We can expose everything at once, making it impossible to cover up." Richardson frowned thoughtfully. "It's risky, but she has a point. Public exposure would make it harder for the Blackwoods to use their influence to bury this. And I have a press contact who's attending tonight. She could bring a camera crew." "Then it's settled," Lily said, her determination growing. Tonight, Alexander Blackwood faces justice for what he did to my father and countless others. And he'll do it in front of the very society he's manipulated for so long. As they finalized their plan for the evening, Lily thought of Echo, the unlikely messenger who had started her on this journey. The Parrot's cryptic warnings had been the catalyst for uncovering a 15-year-old crime and bringing to light a web of corruption that had entangled their small town for generations. Tonight, those echoes from the past would finally be heard in full clarity, and the truth her father had died protecting would at last be revealed. The Blackwood estate glimmered with lights as Vermont's elite gathered for the annual charity gala. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, disgorging passengers in evening wear who were greeted by uniformed staff. Inside, champagne flowed freely, and conversation hummed beneath crystal chandeliers. Lily, dressed in a borrowed black gown that transformed her from the florist everyone overlooked to someone who commanded attention, stood across the street, observing the scene. Margaret had worked miracles with her hair and makeup, creating an elegant sophistication that helped her blend with the wealthy guests. "Remember the plan," Richardson said, adjusting his bow tie nervously. As a local journalist, he had a legitimate invitation to the event, though he rarely attended such functions. Tonight was an exception. "I'll signal my contact at Channel 8 once you're in position. Margaret will handle the technical side from the van." Lily nodded, clutching the small clutch purse containing copies of the most damning evidence: the audio recording, photographs of key documents, and most importantly, the microfilm images her father had hidden. Margaret had spent hours preparing concise, undeniable evidence packets that could be quickly distributed to key attendees. "If anything feels wrong, we abort," Margaret reminded her from the driver's seat of the nondescript van parked in the shadows. "Your safety comes first." "I'll be fine," Lily assured her, though her racing heart suggested otherwise. "Everyone will be watching Blackwood during his speech. That's our moment." With one last check of her appearance, Lily crossed the street and approached the entrance, Richardson a few steps behind her. They had decided to arrive separately to avoid drawing attention. Her invitation, painstakingly forged using a template Richardson had obtained, was accepted without question by the harried security staff managing the influx of guests. Inside, the mansion had been transformed. The main hall, where just hours earlier Lily had retrieved her father's hidden evidence, now served as the central gathering space. Crystal glasses clinked, expensive perfume scented the air, and Lily noticed her own flower arrangements adorning every surface, roses and lilies creating a backdrop of elegance for the evening's proceedings. Moving through the crowd with practiced confidence she didn't feel, Lily accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. She sipped it slowly, scanning the room for Alexander Blackwood while avoiding direct eye contact with anyone who might recognize her. She spotted him holding court near the grand staircase, surrounded by admirers. Blackwood appeared completely at ease, laughing at something a grey-haired man had said, utterly unaware of what was about to unfold. The contrast between his current jovial demeanor and the cold, calculating voice on the recording, discussing her father's fate, made Lily's blood boil. Richardson appeared at her elbow, his expression tense. "Channel 8 is here. Sarah Miller and her cameraman are posing as regular attendees, but they're ready to start filming on my signal. Are you sure about this, Lily?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything," she replied, her gaze still fixed on Blackwood. "He's taken enough from my family. Tonight it ends." According to the program clutched in her hand, Blackwood would make his address at 8:30, thanking donors and announcing the charity beneficiaries for the year. It was now 8:15. As she waited, Lily wandered toward the aviary, feeling a sudden need to check on Echo. The room was unlocked but dimly lit, suggesting it wasn't part of the evening's tour. Inside, several birds rested on perches, but she immediately recognized Echo's distinctive plumage. The parrot was awake, his intelligent eyes following her movements. "Hello, old friend," she whispered, approaching his perch. "You started all this, you know. Your warnings led me right to the truth." Echo tilted his head, studying her with what seemed like recognition. Then, to her astonishment, he spoke in a clear, distinct voice. "Lily, like your father." Her breath caught. Had the parrot just said a name? Before she could process this, he continued, "Trust the light, find the truth." The phrases were familiar, the same cryptic warnings he had given her weeks ago, but now they carried new meaning. Echo hadn't just been randomly repeating words, he had been deliberately trying to guide her, perhaps echoing her father's last instructions to him. "Miss Morgan, what a pleasant surprise!" The cold voice from the doorway made Lily freeze. Alexander Blackwood stood silhouetted against the hallway light, his expression unreadable. He stepped into the aviary, closing the door behind him with a soft click. "I'm admiring your collection," Lily said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Echo seems to have recovered well." "Indeed." Blackwood approached slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Though I find it interesting that you managed to secure an invitation to my private gala, especially considering I don't recall adding the local florist to the guest list." "I have connections," Lily replied, subtly positioning herself closer. "To the door, people who believe in justice." "Justice," Blackwood repeated, as if tasting the word. "An interesting concept. Highly subjective, wouldn't you say?" "Not when it comes to certain things," Lily countered. "Like the truth about what happened to my father 15 years ago." The mention of her father caused a barely perceptible tightening around Blackwood's eyes, the only indicator that her words had struck a nerve. "Your father chose to abandon his family," he said smoothly. "A regrettable decision, but not one I had any influence over." "That's not what the evidence suggests," Lily replied, holding his gaze steadily. "Not what you yourself admitted to on tape the night before he disappeared." For the first time, genuine surprise flashed across Blackwood's face, quickly replaced by cold calculation. "I don't know what you think you've found, Miss Morgan, but making unfounded accusations against someone of my standing is dangerous territory." "The territory became dangerous the moment you decided my father knew too much," Lily said, her voice gaining strength. "The moment you and your father planned to silence him permanently." Echo suddenly flapped his wings agitatedly. "The safe behind the painting. Thomas found the truth." Blackwood's head snapped toward the parrot, his composed facade cracking. "That bird has been nothing but trouble," he muttered almost to himself. "He's been the voice my father no longer has," Lily corrected him. "And in 15 minutes, everyone in that ballroom will hear exactly what you did." Understanding dawned. In Blackwood's eyes, "You're planning some kind of public revelation. How dramatic." His tone was dismissive, but Lily could see the tension in his shoulders. "Whatever evidence you think you have is conclusive," Lily interrupted. "The microfilm from the painting, the audio recording of you and your father planning my father's disappearance, the safety deposit box contents documenting decades of fraud, blackmail, and corruption." With each item she listed, Blackwood's expression darkened. By the time she finished, his aristocratic features had transformed into a mask of contained fury. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said, his voice dangerously low. "No idea what kind of power the Blackwood name carries in this town, in this state." "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," Lily replied. "A man who's lived behind a mask of respectability while building his fortune on crime and intimidation. A man who had my father silenced to protect his family's secrets." Blackwood took a step toward her, his control visibly slipping. "Your father was a gardener who forgot his place. He stumbled onto matters that didn't concern him, and he paid the price for his curiosity. Just as you will if you continue down this path." The direct threat hung in the air between them. Lily should have been terrified, but instead a strange calm settled over her. She had the truth now, confirmation from Blackwood's own mouth about her father's fate. "It's too late," she told him quietly. "The evidence isn't just with me. It's been distributed, backed up, secured with instructions to release everything if anything happens to me or my mother." A discreet knock at the aviary door interrupted their standoff. Hayes's voice called through, "Mr. Blackwood, it's time for your address." Blackwood's jaw clenched as he glanced between Lily and the door. "This conversation isn't over," he warned. "Her? You're right about that," Lily agreed. "In fact, it's about to continue in front of all your guests." For a moment, she thought he might physically prevent her from leaving, but years of public appearances had conditioned Blackwood to maintain appearances. With visible effort, he composed his features and opened the door. "After you, Miss Morgan," he said coldly. "I wouldn't want you to miss my speech." The ballroom had filled to capacity during their confrontation. Richardson stood near the makeshift stage, making eye contact with Lily as she entered. A slight nod confirmed that everything was in place. Nearby, she spotted Sarah Miller from Channel 8, her cameraman, casually adjusting equipment that looked like standard photography gear but was actually broadcasting equipment. Blackwood moved toward the stage, pausing to speak urgently to Hayes. The security chief immediately glanced in Lily's direction, then moved to intercept her. But Richardson was faster, smoothly inserting himself between Lily and Hayes with a champagne glass extended toward her. "Showtime," he murmured, guiding her toward a position near the front of the crowd. Blackwood took his place at the podium. The picture of aristocratic confidence, despite the tension Lily knew was churning beneath. "Distinguished guests, friends, and supporters," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hushed room. "Welcome to the annual Blackwood Foundation Charity Gala." As he launched into his prepared remarks about the foundation's charitable works, Lily positioned herself directly in his line of sight. She wanted him to see her, to know that his moment of reckoning was approaching with every platitude he uttered. "For 3 generations, the Blackwood family has prided itself on ethical business practices and community stewardship," he continued, his gaze briefly locking with Lily's. "We believe in transparency, integrity, and accountability." The irony of his words was not lost on her. Blackwood knew exactly what she planned, yet he was trapped by the very social performance he had perfected over years. To cancel his speech, or have her removed, would create exactly the scene he was desperate to avoid. "And now I am pleased to announce this year's beneficiaries." As he began listing the charities that would receive donations, Richardson discreetly passed Lily a microphone connected to the house sound system. The Channel 8 cameraman had moved to a central position, ready to capture what was about to unfold. Blackwood concluded his announcements to polite applause. "Thank you all for your continued support. Together, we are making Pinecrest a better community for a community built on lies." Lily's voice cut through the applause as she activated the microphone. The sound system carried her words clearly across the ballroom, causing every head to turn in her direction. "A community where the powerful silence the truth." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Blackwood's face hardened, though he maintained his public smile. "I believe we have an uninvited guest with a flair for the dramatic," he said smoothly. "Security will assist you now, Miss Morgan," Lily supplied firmly. "Lily Morgan, daughter of Thomas Morgan, the man you made disappear 15 years ago when he discovered your family's criminal enterprises." The murmuring intensified. Blackwood's smile became strained as he gestured for Hayes, who began moving through the crowd toward Lily. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lily continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "the Blackwood Foundation presents itself as a pillar of philanthropy, but it's built on forgery, fraud, and intimidation. I have evidence that Alexander Blackwood and his father were directly involved in my father's disappearance after he discovered documents proving their involvement in art forgery and money laundering schemes. Before Hayes could reach her, Richardson stepped forward. As a journalist with the Pinecrest Gazette, I can corroborate Miss Morgan's claims. We have documented evidence, including audio recordings of the Blackwoods planning Thomas Morgan's disappearance. On cue, Sarah Miller signaled her cameraman, who was now openly filming. "Sarah Miller, Channel 8 News," she announced, moving to stand beside Lily. "We're broadcasting live. Mr. Blackwood, would you care to respond to these allegations?" The ballroom erupted in confused chatter. Guests looked between Lily and Blackwood, unsure what to believe. Hayes froze mid-stride, suddenly aware of the cameras and the potential public relations disaster unfolding. Blackwood's composure finally cracked. "This is absurd," he snapped. "Security, remove these people immediately." But it was too late. Margaret had entered from a side door, distributing packets of evidence to key figures in the room: the district attorney, 2 state senators, and several prominent business leaders. The Channel 8 broadcast was ensuring that everything unfolding would be seen by thousands of viewers across the state. "We have copies of original documents showing how the Blackwoods have been authenticating forged artwork for decades," Lily said, her voice gaining strength as she saw the shock and interest on the faces around her. "We have financial records tracking payoffs to officials who looked the other way, and most damning of all, we have this." She nodded to Richardson, who activated a small speaker. Alexander Blackwood's voice, 15 years younger but unmistakable, filled the room. "Handle it. Tonight, make it look like he left town willingly, and find whatever evidence he's collected." The recording continued, each word driving home the conspiracy that had destroyed Lily's family. When it ended, the silence in the ballroom was absolute. All eyes turned to Alexander Blackwood, whose face had drained of color. "That recording has been authenticated by forensic audio experts," Richardson stated into the silence. "It was made the night before Thomas Morgan disappeared." One of the state senators stepped forward, evidence packet in hand. "Mr. Blackwood, as chairman of the State Ethics Committee, I find these allegations deeply disturbing. I believe it would be appropriate for you to address them directly." Blackwood looked around the room, seeing his carefully constructed world crumbling before his eyes. The wealthy and powerful guests who had once courted his favor now regarded him with suspicion and disgust. The live broadcast ensured there would be no containing this scandal. "This is a misunderstanding," he began weakly. "These documents are taken out of context. Like the context of my father's car being found at the bottom of Coldwater Lake last year," Lily interjected. "A discovery that was mysteriously buried by the sheriff's department after receiving a substantial donation from the Blackwood Foundation." The district attorney, a woman in her 50s with a reputation for independence, was carefully examining the documents Margaret had handed her. "These warrant immediate investigation," she announced, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling my office now to initiate proceedings." Blackwood's face contorted with fury as he realized the full extent of his exposure. In a last desperate attempt to regain control, he turned to Hayes. "Get them out of here! All of them! Now!" But Hayes hesitated, glancing at the cameras and the increasingly hostile crowd. "Sir, I think—" "Now, Hayes!" Blackwood shouted, his aristocratic veneer completely shattered. The security chief took a reluctant step forward, then stopped as a new voice joined the confrontation. "I believe I can add something to this discussion." The crowd parted to reveal an elegantly dressed woman in her 60s. Clara Blackwood, Alexander's mother, and the widow of James Blackwood. Her expression was grave as she approached the podium. "For too long I've remained silent about the criminal activities my husband and son have conducted in the name of the Blackwood family," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the stunned room. "Tonight, That silence ends. Alexander stared at his mother in disbelief. "Mother, what are you doing?" Clara ignored him, addressing the crowd directly. "I can confirm that everything Miss Morgan has presented is true. My husband orchestrated art forgery and authentication schemes for decades, and when Thomas Morgan discovered evidence of these activities, Alexander was instructed to ensure his silence." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Clara continued, her composure remarkable despite the enormity of her confession. "I've spent 15 years living with this knowledge, watching my son continue his father's corrupt practices while presenting himself as a pillar of the community. Tonight, I choose to stand with the truth, regardless of the consequences for my family name." Alexander lunged toward his mother, only to be restrained by two men who Lily recognized. As federal agents, Richardson's contacts had come through after all. "Alexander Blackwood," one announced formally, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, fraud, and suspicion of involvement in the disappearance of Thomas Morgan." As the agents led a shell-shocked Blackwood away, the ballroom descended into chaos. Reporters pushed forward, cameras flashed, and guests hurriedly distanced themselves from the disgraced host. Lily stood in the center of the storm, watching as 15 years of injustice began to unravel. Clara Blackwood approached her, genuine remorse etched on her aristocratic features. "Miss Morgan, no apology can possibly compensate for what my family has done to yours. But for what it's worth, I'm deeply, profoundly sorry." Lily studied the older woman, seeing not the wife of a criminal mastermind, but another victim of James Blackwood's toxic influence. "Why now?" she asked simply. "Because silence in the face of wrongdoing eventually becomes complicity," Clara replied quietly, "and because your courage in confronting my son gave me the strength to finally do what's right." In the days that followed, the full extent of the Blackwoods' criminal empire was revealed. Federal investigators descended on Pinecrest, seizing records, questioning associates, and uncovering decades of corruption that had spread throughout the region's elite circles. Coldwater Lake was dragged thoroughly, leading to the recovery of Thomas Morgan's remains, allowing Lily and Eleanor to finally lay him to rest with the dignity he deserved. Alexander Blackwood faced multiple indictments, his empire dismantled piece by piece as former associates rushed to cooperate with authorities in exchange for leniency. 1 month after the gala, Lily sat in her flower shop, arranging a bouquet of lilies while Echo watched from a perch by the window. She had adopted the parrot permanently, unable to part with the creature who had inadvertently set everything in motion. Eleanor, fully recovered from her poisoning, entered with 2 cups of tea. "The shop looks beautiful," she commented, setting 1 cup beside Lily. "Those new arrangements for the community center are your best work yet." Lily smiled, grateful to see color back in her mother's cheeks. The truth about Thomas had brought Eleanor a kind of peace that no medical treatment could provide, the knowledge that her husband had never abandoned them, that he had, in fact, given his life trying to protect them. The bell above the door chimed as Richardson entered, followed by Sarah Miller. Both journalists had seen their careers transformed by the Blackwood exposé, with Richardson receiving national recognition for his 15-year pursuit of justice. "Good news," he announced, holding up the morning paper. "Alexander Blackwood's plea deal requires full cooperation and restitution to all victims. The judge is establishing a fund for those harmed by the Blackwood schemes, including compensation for your family, Lily." "I don't care about the money," Lily replied honestly. "Having the truth is enough," Sarah smiled. "Well, there's more. Clara Blackwood is converting the estate into a community art center, with a special wing dedicated to validating authentic artwork. She's asked if you would consider serving on the board, given your father's expertise and your own connection to the case." The idea was startling but somehow fitting, transforming a place built on fraud into a center for artistic truth. "I'll think about it," Lily promised. After the journalist left, Lily moved to stand beside Echo's perch, gently, stroking his feathers. "We did it, didn't we?" she murmured. "We found the truth just like Dad wanted." Echo tilted his head, his bright eyes fixed on hers. "Trust the light," he repeated, then added in what Lily could have sworn was a content tone. "Family safe now." Outside, the shop window, Pinecrest continued its daily rhythms, fundamentally changed by the fall of its most powerful family, yet resilient in the way small towns often are. For Lily, the flower shop that had once felt like a trap now represented possibility, a foundation from which to build a new life unshaded by the secrets of the past. That evening, as she closed the shop, Lily noticed a small envelope that had been slipped under the door. Inside was a key and a note in Clara Blackwood's elegant handwriting. "The lighthouse property has been transferred to your name. I believe your father would want you to have it. May it stand as a beacon of truth for generations to come." Lily clutched the key, remembering Echo's repeated phrase, "Trust the light." Somehow, her father had known. The lighthouse would be significant, a safe haven when Lily needed it most, and now a symbol of the truth finally brought to light. As she walked home through the gathering dusk, Echo riding contentedly on her shoulder, Lily felt a sense of a peace she hadn't known in 15 years. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it was unburdened by the shadows of the past. Like the flowers she tended, her life had weathered a season of darkness, only to emerge stronger, ready to bloom in the light of truth. Dear listeners, we hope you've been captivated by Lily Morgan's journey from humble florist to fearless truth seeker. Like Lily, who discovered her strength through uncovering long-buried secrets, we believe that every story has the power to transform us. If this tale of courage and justice resonated with you, please show your support by subscribing to our channel and giving this video a thumbs up. We've created a special playlist of equally compelling stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. You'll find it linked to your left. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have had Lily's courage to confront the powerful Blackwood family? Your engagement helps us continue bringing these emotional journeys to life. New stories await you every day, each one carefully crafted to inspire, move, and entertain. Until our next tale, remember that truth, like Echo's persistent warnings, will always find a way to be heard.